Yo, it's Flash here again, and we're getting cracking straight into it with Skeleton Archers, the next choice on the Tombkings core list. They were very, very good, and still are, actually, in the new edition of Fantasy. Used by a lot of veteran Tombkings players, and new people alike since they come in starting box set, and they really are nice models, and I do like them, even though they haven't updated them. So let's get into the tactics. They still come in the unit size 10+. Instead of the shield, they come with hand weapon and bow. Now, they do have one rule over Skeleton Warriors, is that they have the arrows of the Aspines, is that they never take any negative modifiers. So in the old rules, they always used to hit on 5s. Well, now, with their BS of 2, means you obviously always hit on 2s before modifiers, but Skeleton Warriors never take any modifiers. In fact, anything that fires a ranged weapon in the whole Tombkings army doesn't take any negative modifiers, which is absolutely amazing, because it means although you only ever hit with 30 shots, if you take a nice unit of 30 of these guys, and you can get them 15 wide, 2 deep, and you get all of the shots off, you will hit with 10 actual shots. Now, if you're shooting a unit of Shades, or an independent character, or Chameleon Skinks, or anything, even crazy, Way Watchers, which those guys are little bastards. Well, they used to be in 7th anyway. Now, if you shoot at them, you're never going to hit them usually, because they're skirmishers, they're additional -2 to hit at. They could be in terrain, and soft cover. Now you'll get 10 hits. Now obviously strength 3, toughness 3, because anything you're shooting at these guys at usually should be soft. You get 5 solid wounds. Now most of the stuff you're going to be shooting at, things like gutter runners and stuff, you'll cut those down in droves, and they're absolutely fantastic for just weeding stuff out. Especially when you consider those really small, elite but quite fragile units are oh so very deadly to your constructs. Things like I just mentioned the gutter runners, where they're poisonous. You want to be cutting them down so they don't go getting their poisonous 6s and wounding your toughness 8 constructs and shredding them to pieces before you can mash the clan rats in combat. Now, some of the upgrades you get for the unit is you obviously have the command, which are 10 points per model, and you get the light armor. Now, light armor upgrade for skeletons is really I can't see a point to it myself. I mean, making them 7 points a model, it's quite expensive, and then obviously there's no option to give them any shields, so you can never get that parry. So all you can ever really get is that 6-up save, which is totally useless. I mean, if these guys are ever in combat, apart from unless there's a massive tactical advantage for you to having them in combat, they're pretty much a lost cause anyway. And since you can't stand and shoot, it's not as if you can expect to, really bump people off with these. All you can best hope for is really just tie units up. Now, there are some great things you can do with these units. I mean, obviously you have to, like we said earlier, you have to take 600 points of core. Now, for 190 points, you can take 30 of these guys with a musician. Now, that's a devastating amount of fire. Yeah, 190 points, 30 of them in mission. That's a devastating amount of fire. Absolutely, especially if you go using, a bit of synergy there with the law of Nakara, and you casting them extra shot. I mean, these guys will kick out 60 shots. A third of those will hit. You'll get 20 hits, and you can actually really put some hurt on some light cavalry. Even just chipping away at large blocks of infantry, especially after the Screaming Skulls have hit. Now, one thing I actually did the other week, I played against my friend with a unit of ghouls with a regen banner. Now, I hit them first with a Screaming Skull. Now, it says that you can't regen that phase. So since it's still a shooting phase, when you let loose with your Skeleton Archers, you're talking about 5s to wound the ghouls, but yeah, you'll cut them down in droves when you do hit, because they just won't have any save. So there is some really useful tactics for that. There's also something really nice where, if you have these guys lined up 10 wide, and however many deep you want, you're going to obviously take them. If you cast that extra shot, it says in the lore that you get an extra attack as well as the extra shot. So what could be really devastating is your opponent doesn't expect it, but in the following turn, although you can't stand and shoot, he's going to charge you, and the front rank will kick out 2 attacks each, which can be quite funny. Not for him, obviously. Now, we got a great chance for a bit of synergy here, and you all know how much I love synergy. You've got a spell cast on 11+, which is called the Incantation of Desiccation, and it is a hex spell, range 24, and you can lower your unit's strength and toughness by 1. You can cast it on the higher level and lower it by D3. But if you were to, like we just said, the example of the ghouls, lower them to from strength 3, toughness 4 to strength 2, toughness 3, dropping that Screaming Skull on them, that anyone on the templates ain't going to get killed on a 4+, and then when you shoot at them, you're wounding them on a 4+ instead. So if you kick out your 60 shots, you get your 20 hits, you get your 10 wounds. Now if someone's got a horde of ghouls, if you take 40 ghouls, 50 ghouls, 50 ghouls is going to cost them I think 400 points. Now if you just kill 10 with shooting from a skeleton archer unit, which is maybe what, half the price of that ghoul unit, probably even less, and a Screaming Skull catapult, and you can wade off 20 of their number, you're going to give them a really hard time. And then the beauty of that is then your opponent's also going to have to concentrate a lot of his magic then in resurrecting ghouls, instead of putting the hurt on you with that bloody Van Hales charging that extra distance, and that Curse of Years. God, I hate that spell. And that what the hell is that? Wind of Undeath? Oh, that can go suck a fuck as well. Now, really, like everything in this book, or like anything in the whole of Warhammer Fantasy, you have to really consider what do they do? I mean, what do they bring for you? I mean, like we've already said, you've got to spend your 600, so how do they fit in? I mean, there's no point you just going, yeah, I'll spend all my core on archers, because you're just going to have a strung out battle line, and you just have to be hiding behind thin lines of archers, which you can't actually do that. You can, but it doesn't work. You can't really make a gun line with Tombkings, just because you're limited war machines. I mean, all you can really have is your 2 lots of your Screaming Skulls, and then backed up with your archers. You don't have enough devastating firepower, but what you can do is force your opponent to come to you. Now, obviously, with these extra shots with your archers, you're kicking out. It does mean that you could do quite a counter-attacking army, whereas like I play with War Sphinxes and Tomb Guard, your skeleton archers, I take 2 nice units of them, and that way you've got one that could 20 man, it can either hop in your watchtower, or if you're not playing that scenario, just hold back, hold your flanks, and it's a very annoying unit for your opponent to get rid of. I mean, if he tries to whip around your flanks, you got that musician there, you reform, bang, you got 20 models, you're automatically kicking out your straight 4 combat res with your ranks and standard. And he's got to then wade through 20 models, so they will hold down units, and they are very good. But you've got to realise their limitations. They're not going to be running around the board performing heroic deeds for you. Now, at the 6 points a model they come in at, it's expensive as something with only ballistic skill 2, but you've got to remember all the trade-offs you get with the whole Tombkings army. I mean, your army's overly expensive because you can resurrect them, so that one guy might not just live one time, it might live a whole series of times. And how dependable he is. I mean, yes, he's dependably shit, but he's still very dependable. You're not going to get hit by someone else's Screaming Skull catapult, or you're not going to take a terror check, or you're not going to just lose that run round of combat by 1 and just flee off the board. So you can rely on your skeleton units, even if you can only rely on them to do very shit and meaningless tasks. Now here's where the really nice bit that comes in with these scaly archers. What they can do is by having they can sit in front of, if you play with a casket, which we'll get onto later, and 2 Screaming Skulls behind it. Now, weirdly enough, your Screaming Skulls will need to draw line of sight. And with the whole true line of sight nowadays, if you plunk your skeleton archers in front and you lose your line of sight, now that might be considered a bummer. But with the rules as they are now, it says that if you don't roll, even if you roll a hit on the scatter dice, your shot still scatters. Now it scatters whatever you roll on the artillery dice, minus their ballistic skill, which is only 2 for your Screaming Skull catapult crew. But that means that in basically a third of that time when you do roll a hit, you'll be better off being able to draw on a sight. But all the other times when you don't roll a hit, you'll actually be better off blind firing, because you'll get -2 to the result, which if you don't roll a hit and you're firing at them with line of sight, you will scatter the full distance. So quite weirdly, in a lot of scenarios, it doesn't actually pay for you to have line of sight with your catapults. So if you line the 2 up and stick a nice large block of skeleton archers in front of them, kicking off a lot of auto panic checks should they take a wound, and then continuous fire afterwards, it will give your opponent a lot to think about, and hopefully force him to come to you. Now, if he has to come to you, that's where your strengths really lie, because obviously it gives you more turns of shooting, more turns of positioning, and on the flip side, because we can't march as a whole army, when I say we, I consider myself a Tomb King, because we can't actually march, although we can move in our magic phase, it really limits us. And if you have a smart opponent where he forces you to come to him, he will just dispel your moves, your magical moves. So then that really puts you on the back foot. So this is when they really add a lot to your army. Now, I'm not necessarily saying they're worth basing your whole army around, because obviously if you go and take, they've only got range 24, and if you go take in bloody, say even if you kick off 30 of these, and you get your 60 shots a turn, you're only going to be hitting like 20 hits, you're going to be getting 10 wounds, and yeah, that'll put some damage on your opponent, but really it's the psychological effect that you're after. When your opponent looks at your battle line, and if he sees these like 2 units of 20 archers, backed up with these nice blocks of skeleton warriors that are running deep, 5 wide and 8 deep for these skeleton warriors, then he's going to be, he's going to think to himself, "Oh Christ, I better start moving," and that's where you come in, because you can line up charges to him and bring him into firing lanes. So that would be it for skeleton archers. Actually, it's not, because I've got one more disgusting tactic. This is actually really quite cool. If you have a look into the special rules section, there's Queen Kalhida, and she is beloved of the Asp. And she has all really nice, cool rules, like always strike first. She counts as a Tomb King. She has hatred against vampire counts, which is always nice, especially the amount of counts players you see, you cheesy bastards. And poisonous attacks. Now, if she joins a unit, she not only has the Tomb King rule where she passes on a weapon skill, but she also passes on a ballistic skill. And she also gives the unit poisonous attacks. So if you were to take, say, 5 wide, 10 wide, 6 deep, so you took 60 skeleton archers, you'd kick off 10 from the front rank, 10 from the second rank, and then 5 for every rank after that. So that's 4 more ranks. You'd kick off an additional 20 shots. So you'd actually put out 40 shots. So those 40 shots, if you then got the magical attacks and obviously give them 2 times multiple shot, with no minuses and using her ballistic skill, you'd hit on 4s. Now with those 40 shots, you'd score 20 hits. Now you'd score anywhere up to about 8 poisonous wounds. So that could be really something for your opponent to worry about. Really quite devastating. And then when they charge a unit, your unit's weapon skill 6 with that additional attack, because they just fired that additional shot the previous round. So definitely not a you wouldn't win any friends with that kind of list, but you definitely have a lot of fun. So next, guys, we're going to be reviewing the Skeleton Horsemen and Skeleton Horse Archers. We'll do those in a double whammy coming up next.